Karamoy, Tataramanda, Tataramahai. That's it. That's it. Scripture says our praises rise up like incense on the hill. When he hears us reach out and speak and pray and worship, he says, I like what I'm hearing. I'm going to come down and visit and see what's going on. Reach out and touch him. Reach out, get your touch. Get your blessing. Joshua chapter 3, starting at verse 13. Look, I'm starting at verse 11. Look, the ark of the covenant which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth will lead you across the Jordan River. Now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. Verse 13, the priests will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of the water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water, as soon as they touched the water, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam. The water below that point flowed on to the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. I want to speak to you this morning under the topic, Step into Your Miracle. Step into your miracle. You see, somebody sitting there waiting on God to come to them without wanting to have to take action on their own. I'm going to skip to the end of the message for a minute. Can I do that? We serve a God who is not only capable of touching you, capable of blessing you, capable of giving you your miracle, but He is eager to give you your miracle. He is eager to bless you. He is eager to move in your life. There's something we've got to understand, though. Something very important that we don't like to talk about. Miracles oftentimes require us to do something. Miracles oftentimes don't come magically out of nowhere. That door's not going to open unless you knock on it. How's somebody on the inside going to know you're there unless you knock on the door? How are you going to get an answer to your question unless you ask the question? Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Ask and you shall receive. Action. It's a two-way street, my friend. Action. I'm not going to keep standing. You've got to take action sometimes. Oftentimes, we like to sit on the pew and expect God to come to us. without us doing anything to get to God. We like to sit like bumps on a log and wait for all the blessings to come, but we don't want to have to sacrifice. We don't want to have to compromise. We don't want to have to change. I want to tell you right now, this is a word straight from the Lord. I'm not a prophet, but God gave me this. God's waiting to touch someone. In this church here and right now, we're experiencing growth and revival, amazing miracles like we've not seen before. But even so, there's still somebody sitting there waiting on God to come. You're sitting there waiting on God to come to you while you see everybody around you getting touched. Everybody around you getting blessed. And you're sitting there, God, why don't you touch me? Why don't you come to me? And when someone says you got to actually move a little bit, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't like coming up to the front. It's embarrassing, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm still going to get mad at God because He doesn't touch me. I don't want to say I mean to offend you because I don't. But please, if you're feeling pricked in your heart, don't shoot the messenger. Miracles oftentimes require us to do something. They require us to move. They require us to sacrifice. They require us to change. You see, just like the priests, they had to step into the water. That water wasn't going to open up on its own. They could have stood there all day and said, man, I wish that water would just open up. But God gave specific instructions. If you want your miracle, you've got to step into the water. Friend, if you're sitting there asking for a miracle, wondering why God's not doing anything for you, I ask you to look inside your heart and say, am I actually willing to move? Or do I just want to sit here and expect everything to be stirred up to be overflow? We're human beings. We don't like to have to sacrifice. We don't like to have to move. We don't like to have to change. But oftentimes, great miracles require grace. Just as the priest had to step into the water before it parted, we too must often step into our circumstance, step into our miracle, regardless of how impossible it might be. You see, a miracle and a blessing are two different things. Oftentimes they coincide one with another, but they are two separate things. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a miracle is described as a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific law and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine event. According to the same dictionary, a blessing is defined as a beneficial thing for which one is grateful, something that brings well-being. In other words, a miracle is something that man can't do. A miracle is something that you and I try as hard as we cannot fulfill. A blessing is something that you and I can do. I can bless you by going and giving you a $20 HEB gift card and saying, here, go buy some food, go buy something. That's a blessing. But I can't heal you of your cancer. I can't deliver you from your addiction. I can't raise you from the dead. There's a difference here. Israel was faced looking at their blessing, but there was something standing in between them and their blessing, and it was a miracle that had happened. Israel could have stood at the bank, wishing their lives away that water would open, but God told them specifically, you've got to move. He told the priests, you've got to step in to that water. You see, at that time, it was the harvest season, meaning it was raining, plentiful water everywhere. The river was overflowing its banks. It was at flood stage, worse than flood stage. So Israel was not standing there looking at a nice, cool, calm, very pretty river. They were looking at an angry beast in front of them that would not hesitate to take any life that came close. You see, sometimes we're looking for a miracle, but we don't want to have to step into that angry beast. God's telling you, I've got something for you, but you've got to be willing and brave enough to take that step. We don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't like to change. We don't like to feel like we're forced to do something. But if you want your blessing, sometimes you've got to step into your miracle. God will not bring the miracle to you. You've got to go to it. This is controversial, I know, because sometimes we're brought up thinking, oh, all you have to do is sit there and it's all going to be great. No, my friend. The real world says if you want something, you've got to work. If you want change, you've got to do something. If you need something, you've got to act. This is a partnership. We are partnered with God in this. God desires to partner with us in bringing our miracles to pass. But He will not serve it to you on a silver. That partnership requires our dedication, our sacrifice, and our willingness to move. It shall come to pass as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord, the ark of all the earth shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of Jordan shall be cut off. We see here the children of Israel standing at the edge of their promise. You see, their blessing was in sight. They could smell the blessing. They could taste the blessing. They could feel that blessing. But there was a miracle they had to step into in order to get the blessing. God says, I want to give you the promised land. I want to give you all of this. I have blessings for you like you've never seen before. But in between you and your blessing is a miracle you've got to step in. The waters did not part just by the Israelites standing at the edge. They could have sat there and yelled and screamed at the water all day long, and the water wasn't going to continue except to stay in flood stage. The commandment was, if you want that ark, if you want that water to stop and slow down, dry off, and back up there, you first got to take a step of faith. Friend, if you want your miracle, you've got to take that step of faith. Somebody sitting here today, seeing this blessing that we're seeing, feeling the move of God that we're feeling, but they're feeling left out because you're not willing to take that step into your miracle. I don't know who I'm preaching to, but this is so strong in my heart. The miracle's not coming to you. You've got to go to your miracle. Many of us today are standing at the edge of a miracle. Maybe you've been standing at the edge of your miracle for many, many years. Sitting there waiting on God to come. Waiting on the blessing to come. We're standing there waiting on the water to magically part on its own before we move. God, if you do this, then I'll do this. We bargain with God. God, if you will only touch here, then I'll do this. God, if you will magically give me this, then I'll serve you. God, you want me to serve you? Oh, you just got to do this for me. No, it doesn't work that way. God says, I've got all of this. I'll show you everything I want to give you, but you've got to take that step. Oftentimes we get angry with God because we're lazy. God, you're giving my brother all of this stuff. And I'm sitting here watching it and I'm not getting any of it. What's going on? God's asking you. Your brother's been moving. Your brother's been changing. Your brother's been sacrificing. What did you do? Well, God, I'm sitting here. And we wonder why the blessing doesn't come back. Sometimes God waits for us to take that. You see, faith is not just believing that God can, it's trusting in Him enough to move before you see the evidence. Israel was standing in front of an angry beast of a river. They didn't see a miracle. They saw death and destruction. They said, if we step into that, we're going to die. God said, you priests, you got to take that. We don't like to have to do that. We don't like the unknown. That was a big question mark, that river there. Israel had to make the decision that we're going to trust God. And whatever happens when I get my feet wet, if I wash away and drown and die, so be it. But God told me to do this, so that's what I'm doing. We sit around not wanting to make that kind of sacrifice. God, you want me to fast and pray? God, you tell me I have to give my tithe and offering and my bills that have to be paid. I got a car that needs work. I got rent that comes due, and you're wanting me to. God says, try me. Try me. And I'm a testament to that. If you live like you're supposed to live, if you sacrifice like you know you sacrifice, God will provide. The blessing will come. Time after time, I've found myself needing something where there's no other way to turn, nothing else I could do. But in the past, I've lived like I need to live. I've sacrificed like I need to sacrifice. And somehow or another, God says, I see your faith. I see your faith. And there's answers that have come that only God can do. If it happens to me, it can happen to you. We've got to step into that water while it's still flowing, knowing that we might end up in a worse situation than we're at right now. But we've got to get our feet wet. While the obstacle is still present, we've got to trust that God will come in. God will respond. Without that trust, God's going to say, well, I told you here's what you have to do. You didn't do it, so here we are. And we sit here getting mad because we don't want to take that. We in this church are standing on the edge of the greatest revival we have ever seen. We're standing on the edge of a revival to the likes of flipping this city upside down. But are we willing to take that step into the raging beast of a river? Are we willing to potentially risk our safety and our security to say, God, I'm trusting in you. Whatever you want to do, here we go, God. 2 Kings 18, verse 33. He piled wood on the altar, cut the bowl into pieces, laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, fill 4 large jars with water, pour the water over the offering and the wood. After they had done this, he said, do it again. They finished it. He said, do it a 3rd time. They did it so much that water filled the moat around the altar. Water was saturating every last little bit of that altar. Verse 36, at the usual time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to your spirit. And immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stone, even the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. This is Elijah on Mount Carmel. Remember the same Elijah on Mount Carmel? Sat there and got mocked by the 450 prophets of faith. Our God's better than you. Look what our God can do. Elijah said, all right, I'll put my money where my mouth is. He said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to build an altar to your God. You're going to do your little thing and try and get your God to bring fire from heaven. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask my God to bring down fire from heaven. And whichever God does it, that's the God that we're going to serve. The prophets of Baal said, ha! You got a deal. Let's do it. So the prophets did their little thing, built up their altar, started their little prayer dance or whatever they did, trying to call on Baal and everything. Elijah sitting over there, the prophets put up and like, come on, man. I thought maybe your God's asleep. Try it again. Maybe he'll wake up. That process repeated itself. Finally, Elijah stepped up and said, enough is enough. God's been going for too long. He said, let me prove to you that my God is. You see, Elijah had to take action. Elijah didn't know God was going to bring down fire. Elijah had no guarantee God was going to answer his prayer. But Elijah had to take action. Elijah had to risk his spirit. Elijah had to risk his reputation. Elijah had to risk his life. Through that risk, we see one of the biggest displays of God's power in this. Not only did Elijah just build the altar, he said, let's dunk a whole bunch of water on it. Just to kind of nail that thing in just a little bit more and prove even more that my God is who said he is. He did it 4 different times in a time of extreme drought. There wasn't enough water to go around. But he said, let me prove it. My God said, let me prove it. Elijah faced opposition from 450 prophets of Baal. But he knew something that they did. Before God would send the fire, there first had to be sacrifice. We want God to send the fire, but we don't want to have to sacrifice. We want all the blessing, but we don't want to have to do anything. We see Elijah went above and beyond, poured all that water in, saturated everything. He wanted to prove that this is nothing that he could do under his own. He wanted to prove that nothing he could dance around all he wanted to do, but he couldn't call down fire from heaven himself. He wanted to prove that this miracle required absolute reliance. Absolute reliance. My question for you today is, are we willing to pour everything out on this? It was a drought like if they had not seen before. There wasn't enough water to spare. But he said, I got faith. He said there might only be so much water, but I've got to risk everything to get my miracle. I've got to risk it all. Sometimes the miracle we're looking for requires us. It requires us to lay it all out on the altar. Brother Nick, I don't want to do that. It's not. It's embarrassing. It's not fun. Sacrifice is not fun. Sacrifice is not fun. But you've got to be willing to lay it all out, pour it all out on the altar. Sometimes the miracle we're looking for is waiting on us to give up our time, to give up our comfort, to give up our pride. Elijah's actions on Mount Carmel show us that when you go beyond what is expected and surrender it all to God, He will respond. Are you willing to pour it all out? See, God sent the fire. But He didn't send it right. Elijah could have just stood there and said, well, God, before there was an altar, before there was sacrifice, Elijah had to make himself uncomfortable. God sent the fire, but not until the altar was prepared, and not until the sacrifice. Your miracle requires you. Your miracle requires you to get uncomfortable. Have we given our all to God? Have we poured it all out on the altar? Or are we too busy sitting in the pew waiting on God to come in? Sometimes God withholds His blessing. Not because He hates us, not because He wants us to suffer, but because He's waiting for us to prevent the He yearns to bless you. He yearns to touch you, but you've got to sacrifice. He wants with all of His might to bless you and see you succeed. But are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to lay it all out on the altar, my God sits there and it hurts His heart to see you not willing to sacrifice. He wants nothing but the best for His children. But if we're not willing to sacrifice, He will not give. I don't know what the sacrifice looks like for you. That's different for everyone. It might look like stepping away from things that we like, stepping away from our friendships, from our habits, from our old life, stepping away from things that hinder our spiritual growth. Sometimes you got to give up that thing that you love. It might be harmless to the real world, but God says yes. God, I don't want to take this. You want your miracle? Do you want the water to open or do you not? I think of Moses out in the desert looking for water. He could have sat there and gotten mad at God because water wasn't showing up. He wanted the miracle. But God said, you got to take that. Moses had to go up to the rock and smite the rock. Without smiting the rock, the miracle wouldn't. Moses had to risk looking like a fool. Think about it, watching some old man in the desert go up with a stick and beating up on a rock. What good is that? Moses had to risk looking like a fool in order for the miracle to happen. Moses has to sacrifice. What are we willing to lay on the altar for God? He wants to send the blessing. He wants to send the miracle, but we've got to sacrifice. 2 Kings 5. Verse 10. Elisha sent a messenger out to him. This is Naaman, being struck with leprosy. He went to Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy. But Naaman became angry and he stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me. I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, Abana, Pharpar better than any of the rivers in Israel? Why shouldn't I just wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away and went. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, go, wash, and be healed. So Naaman went down to the Jordan River, dipped himself 7 times, just as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was Naaman, a commander in the army, was a leper who sought healing from the prophet's word. Naaman had access to just about everything he could have access to, except he did not have access to the word. Naaman sought out his miracle. He went to Elisha. Elisha, come on, just say the word, wave your magic wand, and I'm going to be healed. Elisha said, now hold on, there's something else that is. Naaman, just like us, got angry at the prophet. We get angry at the man of God when we go to the man of God and say, hey, I need this. Won't you do this for me? And the man of God says, hold on first. You got to do it. Naaman got so mad, he went off in a fit of rage. He was questioning, why couldn't he just speak the word? Why was it necessary to do this repetitive and seemingly pointless act? We ask God, why do you? I don't see a point in sacrificing, God. I don't see a point in putting my pride aside, God. Why do I have to do this? Just say the word, God. Just say the word. Sometimes you've got to be willing. You see, Naaman could have followed partially the prophet's order. He could have gone to the Jordan and just dipped himself 1 time and said, well, prophet said to dip, and that's it. The healing didn't come after the first dip. It didn't come after the second or after the third. It wasn't until he obeyed the command of God fully did the healing come. Your miracle will come if you obey God's command fully. Sometimes, okay, fine, I'll sacrifice, but I'm not going to go the full way. You want me to do this? God, I'll meet you halfway. I'll go over here. No. God sits there and says, do you want your miracle or do you not? Do you want the water to part or do you not? Are you willing to get your feet wet? Are you? Oftentimes we want instant miracles, instant gratifications. We want to ask God for something and immediately it comes to pass right then and right there. But God is asking us to be persistent. We want things to change seemingly overnight, but God's calling us to just keep on dipping. Don't stop with the first or the second or the third. Keep on dipping. But the Jordan's a dirty river. It's nasty. I've got access to some of the cleanest water you could ever see. You want me to go to that filthy mud hole over there? You got to be willing to get dirty in order to get your. You got to be willing to sacrifice pride to get your miracle. You got to know Naaman, the commander of the army, going into the dirtiest river in the land, dipping in, coming out, being covered with dirt, filth, and mud. It wasn't a good sight. But Naaman had to be willing to sacrifice for us. God's calling us just to keep on dipping, keep on trusting, keep on believing. I asked myself this, what if Naaman had stopped after the sixth dip? What would have, I can tell you, he would have missed his miracle. He would have missed his deliverance. He would have missed his blessing. We've got to be willing to be dedicated to follow him. If we get too lazy and only go halfway, it hurts God's heart, but he will not give you. We don't like to hear that. We like to hear the positive things. But I'm here to tell you, you've got to be willing. Luke chapter 18, starting at verse 1. Put that up on the screen here. Luke 18 and verse 1. One day, this is the parable of the persistent widow. One day, Jesus told his disciples a story to show them they should always pray and never give up. There's a judge in a certain city. He said, who neither feared God nor cared about people. A widow of that city came to him repeatedly saying, give me justice in this dispute with my enemy. The judge ignored her for a while, but finally said to himself, I don't fear God or care about people, but this woman's annoying and driving me crazy. I'm tired of her. I'm going to see that she gets justice, not because I care about God or about her, but she's getting on my nerves, so I want her to get out of here. Because she is wearing me out with her constant requests. The Lord said, learn a lesson from this unjust judge. Even he rendered a just decision in the end. So don't you think God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him daily? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will grant justice to them quickly. But when the Son of Man returns, how many will find on the earth? How many will he find on the earth who have? I'm here to tell you, God is not reluctant to bless you. He is not reluctant to give you your miracle. He is not reluctant to answer your question. He is eager to respond. But there are times when he purposely sits there and waits for us to act. Like the widow, we're called to be persistent in our praise, persistent in our faith, persistent in our actions, persistent in our facts. God is more than willing to give. He is more willing to give than we are to receive, but we must show that we are willing. We must show that we are actually in this to win. God's waiting for us to move. We ask God, why don't you do this right now? The time seems right. His ways are better than our ways. God's timing is perfect. Ours is long. God has already prepared your blessing. He's just waiting for us to take it. He's waiting for us. He's waiting for you. So here it is, Lord. The waters didn't part until the priest took that step. Naaman wasn't healed until he completed his 7 steps. The widow received justice because of her. Are you willing? Are you willing? God's calling us to be willing. He's calling us to sacrifice. He doesn't want us to just be ready or available. He wants us to be willing. God's already got the blessing ready and prepared for you. He's just waiting on you to take that step into the way. I don't know what that step is for you. Maybe it's stepping into the water. Maybe it's going into the Jordan where it's all dirty. I don't know what your sacrifice has to be. You and God know what that has. Whether it's stepping in the water, laying down the sacrifice, or just continuing to trust and be persistent with God. The miracle is on the other side of our obedience. That's the big thing here. In between the Jordan, or in between Israel and the Promised Land, was a step. They had to be willing and they had to be obedient. You've got to take that step, my friend. You've got to take that step. We here in this church, each and every one of us, are standing at the edge of a blessing. Maybe you've been asking for something for so many years, and maybe you've given up hope that the answer will ever come. You've got to be willing to take your step. The waters might seem overwhelming. The altar may look daunting.
No.
The journey might feel like it's never going to
It's in the tunnel. Yes. I'm seeing the strength tonight. The Spirit of the Lord is here.